She came to Thanksgiving dinner wearing a blazer that probably cost more than my first car, and I remember thinking, who dresses like that to eat turkey with strangers? My son had been dating her for 8 months. 8 months, and I'd only met her twice. Both times brief, both times at restaurants she chose, both times I paid. I told myself that was just how young people did things now. I told myself a lot of things that year. Her name was Celeste. She was 31, worked in what she called brand consulting, and had a way of speaking that made every sentence sound like a presentation. Not warm, precise. Like she was always measuring the distance between what she wanted and how close she was to getting it. My son's name is Evan. He's 34, works in IT infrastructure, makes decent money, nothing extravagant. His mother passed when he was 26, breast cancer, 2 years of fighting, then nothing. It's been just the two of us since then. We're not the kind of men who talk about feelings over the phone, but every Sunday we have breakfast together. That's our thing. Eggs, coffee, the newspaper. No agenda, just time. So when Evan called in October and said he was bringing Celeste to Thanksgiving, that she'd be staying the whole weekend, I cleaned the guest room and bought the good wine and told myself this was a good sign. He was serious about her. Maybe she was serious about him. I was wrong about what kind of serious she was. Thanksgiving started fine. She complimented my house in that way people do when they're surprised it's nicer than they expected. She helped set the table without being asked. She laughed at the right moments. I thought, okay, maybe I misjudged her. Maybe that precision of hers is just confidence. After dinner, Evan went to wash dishes. He always does that. Clears the table without prompting, stacks everything neatly, runs hot water. His mother taught him that. It's one of the small things about him that makes me proud in a way I can never quite say out loud. Celeste and I were left at the table with the remnants of pie and the last of the wine. She refilled her glass before she spoke. I want to talk to you about something, she said. About the future, Evan's and mine. I folded my hands on the table. All right. We've been talking seriously about getting engaged. She paused. Let that land. I think you know Evan well enough to know he doesn't move fast unless he's sure. That's true, I said. I'm sure too. She smiled. It was a practiced smile, corners of the mouth, no eyes, which is why I think it's time we talked practically about what a foundation looks like for a life together. I didn't say anything. Something in my chest went very still. My family has certain expectations around weddings, she continued. Not extravagant, meaningful. A venue that reflects the occasion. Photography, catering, floral, travel for family. Realistically, we're looking at around $250,000. $250,000. I heard Evan running water in the kitchen, the sound of a dish being placed in the rack. I see, I said. Evan mentioned that you have savings, that you did well with your retirement accounts with the house. She tilted her head slightly. We thought it made sense to have this conversation now, before any announcements, so everyone is on the same page. We thought, she said we. I appreciate you being direct, I said, and I meant it, but not the way she hoped. She kept talking. Venue options in Napa, a photographer she'd already preliminary contacted, a guest list that she described as intimate, maybe 250. I nodded. I poured myself a small amount of wine. I kept my voice level. And then Evan walked back in. He was drying his hands on the dish towel, and when he looked at me, something passed between us that I haven't been able to fully describe since. It wasn't alarm exactly. It was a look I hadn't seen since he was 12 years old and in trouble, and didn't know how to say it. He sat down at the table. Celeste continued talking, something about deposit timelines, and Evan reached across and set his hand flat on the table near mine. Under the edge of his palm was a folded piece of paper, a receipt from the grocery store we'd gone to that morning. He'd written on the back of it, "Dad, don't agree to anything. I'll explain later, please." I palmed it without looking down. I kept my eyes on Celeste. "These are all wonderful ideas," I said. "Let me think about the numbers, and we can talk more this weekend." She smiled again, wider this time, satisfied. Evan excused himself 10 minutes later, said he was tired from the drive. Celeste went to check her phone in the guest room. And I sat alone at that table for a long time, looking at those 5 words written in my son's handwriting on the back of a grocery receipt. Don't agree to anything. He came to my bedroom at 11:30 that night, knocked twice, soft the way he used to when he was a kid and had a nightmare. I was already awake. He sat in the chair by the window, the one that used to be his mother's reading chair. And he didn't speak for a moment. He just looked at the floor. That's how I knew it was bad. How long has this been going on? I asked. He exhaled. Since about month 3. He told me everything that night, in pieces, slowly, the way you talk when the telling itself is painful. Celeste had moved in with him after 2 months. Her lease had ended unexpectedly, she said, and she needed somewhere while she found a new place. That was 7 months ago. She was still there. Within the first month of living together, she'd asked to be added to his primary bank account. For convenience, she said. Bill splitting. He'd agreed. Over the following months, $4,200 for a deposit on an apartment she was going to rent but ultimately didn't take. $30,100 for a dental procedure her insurance supposedly wouldn't cover. $7,800 for a loan to a friend of hers who was in trouble, a friend Evan had never met. $2,400 for a professional development course she registered for and then never completed. He'd tracked it. He showed me the spreadsheet on his phone. 19 separate transactions over 7 months, a little over $22,000. I kept telling myself there were explanations, he said, and there were always explanations. Why didn't you say something to me? He was quiet, because I didn't want you to think I was stupid. That hit me somewhere I wasn't prepared for. I looked at my son. This man I had watched grow from a kid who cried at movies and fixed his own bike and sat with his mother in the hospital without flinching, and I thought about how much courage it must have taken to write those words on a receipt and slide it across a table. You're not stupid, I said. You're someone who trusted the wrong person. That's different. He nodded. He didn't fully believe me yet, but he would. Does she know you know? I asked. No. He looked up. She thinks I'm on board with everything, the wedding, the money, all of it. I've just been stalling. I didn't know what to do. I told him I needed a few days. He said, Dad, be careful. He stopped. She knows what she's doing. I know, I said. So do I. I spent the Friday after Thanksgiving making phone calls. I have a college friend, we've stayed close for 40 years, who spent his career as a financial crimes investigator before he retired. I described the pattern to him. The small escalating requests, the vague explanations, the emotional pressure, the move toward shared finances. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, That's a classic affinity fraud build. She's not done yet. The wedding pitch was the main event. What do I do? Document everything Evan has. Every transaction, every message, if he saved them. Then you want to talk to a lawyer, not to sue, just to understand your options. And you might want to run her name through public records. You'd be surprised what shows up. I thanked him. I hung up. I made another call. A woman I'd worked with years ago was now a paralegal in a firm that handled civil litigation. She owed me no favors, but we'd always been friendly. I described the situation without using names. She listened and said she'd ask one of the attorneys to do a preliminary search, not official, just to look. She called me back Sunday morning. Celeste had a civil judgment against her in Georgia from 4 years earlier. A former boyfriend had sued her for the return of $31,000 she had borrowed across 18 months for a series of reasons that sounded, when I heard them, almost exactly like what Evan had described. He'd won the judgment. She'd never paid it. The judgment was still active. There was also a name discrepancy. Celeste's last name on the Georgia filing was different from the one Evan knew. Not a maiden name situation, an alias. I sat with that information for the rest of Sunday morning. Then I called Evan. We met at the diner near my house on Sunday afternoon, our usual booth, the one by the window. He came in looking tired. He'd been holding all of this alone for too long. I ordered coffee. He ordered the same. Neither of us ate. I told him what I'd found. I laid it out plainly, without drama. The judgment, the alias, the pattern that matched his situation almost exactly. I slid the notes across the table the same way he had slid me that receipt 2 days earlier. He read it slowly. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. Not crying, just that stillness before it. How did she think this would end? He said. It wasn't really a question. She didn't think that far, I said. They never do. He asked me what we should do. First, I said, you need to talk to a real attorney. Not just for advice, for protection. You have documented transactions. You have records. That matters. I paused. Second, we need to get her out of your apartment, carefully, without tipping her off before you're ready. He nodded slowly. And Evan, you don't owe her a confrontation. You don't owe her an explanation. You owe her nothing. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, she's going to make this ugly. Let her, I said. Ugly is fine. Ugly we can handle. He talked to an attorney the following Tuesday. A real one, not a preliminary look. A consultation he paid for himself, walked in with printed bank statements and a timeline. The attorney told him that based on what he had a viable claim for civil recovery. He also advised him to contact the bank immediately and remove Celeste from the joint account before taking any further steps. That happened on a Wednesday morning. Evan went to the bank, removed her access, changed his login credentials. He did it quietly, on his lunch break, and didn't say anything to Celeste when he got home that night. She noticed by Thursday. He told me later that she went very still when she tried to make a purchase and the card declined. She asked him about it. He told her the bank had flagged something and he was handling it. She believed him, or she pretended to. Saturday morning when she was at yoga, a class she attended every week at the same studio, always 9 to 11, Evan moved her things into the hallway. Not thrown. Folded, packed, stacked neatly in the 2 rolling suitcases she brought when she moved in. He'd asked a friend to be there with him, not for anything physical, just as a witness. When she came home, the locks had been rekeyed. She called Evan 17 times in the first hour. She left voicemails that went from confused to wounded to furious inside of about 40 minutes. She called me once. I let it go to voicemail. Her message to me was calm and composed, which told me she was still performing for an audience she thought was watching. She texted Evan's phone, "You're making a huge mistake. I love you. Please call me." She texted again an hour later, "I know your father is behind this. He never liked me." She texted again, "I'll get a lawyer." He forwarded all of it to his attorney. She did not get a lawyer, at least not one willing to take the case. What she got, about 3 weeks later, was a certified letter from Evan's attorney outlining the documented transactions, the civil judgment in Georgia, the name discrepancy, and a formal demand for repayment of the $22,000. The letter made clear that if repayment was not initiated within 30 days, the matter would be referred to law enforcement, and the civil suit would be filed. I don't know what she did the day she received that letter. I imagine she sat with it for a while. She made one more call to Evan. He picked up. His attorney had told him it was fine to listen. She tried 3 different approaches in a single conversation. She denied everything, then said it was a misunderstanding, then said she had been struggling and needed help and that Evan knew that and had offered willingly. He let her talk. He didn't argue. He said at the end, "Celeste, my attorney will be in touch." And he hung up. She initiated a partial repayment plan through an intermediary. No direct contact per the attorney's guidance. Evan accepted it. It wasn't the full amount, and it would take time. But it was an acknowledgement in writing that the money existed and was owed. The attorney told us that was, in practical terms, most of what a civil suit would achieve anyway, without the cost and the time. Evan and I talked about whether to push further, whether to go to law enforcement. We went back and forth. In the end, he decided that having her out of his life and having the repayment agreement on record was enough. He didn't want to spend the next 2 years in courtrooms. He wanted to move forward. I respected that. It was his life, his call. We still have Sunday breakfast. Every week, same diner, same booth by the window. About 2 months after everything settled, Evan came in and sat down and looked. I don't know exactly how to describe it. Lighter. Not happy exactly, but lighter. Like he'd been carrying something for so long he'd forgotten the weight of it, and now that it was gone, he was still adjusting to the absence. He ordered the eggs. I ordered the eggs. We read different sections of the paper and didn't talk much for the first 20 minutes, which is normal for us. Then he said, without looking up, "I should have told you sooner." "Probably," I said. I thought. He stopped. "I thought if I said it out loud it meant I'd been an idiot." "You trusted someone," I said. "She made a career out of being trustworthy. That's not stupidity. That's her doing her job." He was quiet again. Then, "How'd you know not to react at Thanksgiving when she was giving me the whole pitch?" I folded the paper in my lap. "Because I didn't want to close a door I might need later. And because you'd already told me what I needed to know." "I barely wrote anything." "You wrote enough." He looked at me then. And I thought about all the Sunday mornings we'd sat in that booth, all the years since his mother died, all the breakfasts where we didn't talk about what mattered and both knew exactly what we were sitting there for anyway. "She really thought you'd write the check," he said. "I know," I said. "People like her always think the money is the thing that matters most in the room." He almost smiled. "What is the thing that matters most?" I picked up my coffee. "Who's sitting across the table?" He did smile then. Small, quiet like him. We finished our coffee. We left a good tip. We walked out into the cold November air and stood in the parking lot for a minute like we always do, not quite ready to end the morning. "Same time next week?" he said. "Same time next week," I said. He got in his car. I got in mine. Some things I have learned are worth protecting quietly, without announcement, without applause. You don't always need to make a scene to win. Sometimes you just need to know what you're fighting for, and be willing to sit still long enough for the truth to do its work. I keep thinking about that grocery receipt, 5 words in my son's handwriting, pressed flat under the edge of his palm, passed across the table like something fragile that might shatter if handled wrong. People assume that when something like this happens, when someone gets into your family and starts quietly taking, there's a moment of explosion, a confrontation, raised voices, accusations across a dinner table. That's what movies tell you it looks like, but that's not how it actually goes. At least not if you want to win. What I learned from all of this is that the people who do what Celeste did are counting on reaction. They build pressure slowly, one small ask, then another, because they know that by the time the number gets big enough to seem wrong, you're already emotionally invested. You've already said yes too many times to easily say no. The trap isn't the $250,000. The trap is everything that came before it, all the small agreements that made a large one feel like the natural next step. Evan is a good man. He's honest in a way that sometimes works against him. He extends the same good faith to others that he'd want extended to himself. That's not naivety. That's character. And it's exactly what someone like Celeste looks for. She didn't choose him randomly. She chose him because he was trustworthy, because he had resources, because he was still quietly grieving his mother and hadn't fully rebuilt the armor that grief takes down. She read all of that correctly. What she miscalculated was me. I'm 63 years old. I've made bad decisions. I've trusted the wrong people in business, stayed in situations longer than I should have, learned things about human nature the hard way. None of that is something I'd wish on my son. But it gave me something he didn't have yet, the ability to recognize a pattern I'd seen before, and to stay calm when staying calm was the only move that mattered. That's what I want him to carry forward from this. Not bitterness. Bitterness is just pain that didn't find anywhere useful to go. What I want him to carry is the understanding that clear thinking under pressure is a skill, and it can be learned, that the right response to manipulation isn't always the loudest one, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is smile, nod, say "I'll think about it," and then go do your homework. I also want him to understand that asking for help is not the same as admitting defeat. Sliding me that note was one of the bravest things he's done. He had to admit, without saying it directly, that he'd made a mistake and that he needed his father. That takes something most people never develop, the willingness to set down pride when the stakes are real. What happened to Celeste wasn't punishment in any grand sense. It was just consequence. She built something on a foundation of dishonesty, And dishonest foundations don't hold. They never do. Not because the universe is watching, but because the math eventually stops working. You can only keep the story straight for so long before the details contradict each other, before the records exist that you forgot about, before someone makes one phone call and the whole structure starts to lean. Evan and I sat in that diner booth and didn't say much, and that was enough. That's always been enough for us. Some mornings I look at the chair by the window, the one that used to be his mother's, and I think about what she would have made of all this. She was sharper than both of us. She would have spotted Celeste in the first 10 minutes and found a way to say so that was somehow both kind and completely devastating. But she's not here, so it was just me, and I did what I could with what I had. That's all any of us can do.